Over the last day and a half, I've been doing what many of you have been doing, watching the news carefully and trying to make sense of it all. And tonight, I want to speak to you not as a former president, but simply as another American who has witnessed moments like this before. Because what we're seeing right now is one of those moments, the kind that doesn't just dominate headlines for a few days, the kind that can shape the direction of a country for years, sometimes even decades. When I first heard that the United States had launched what the administration is calling Operation Epic Fury, a massive joint military strike against Iran, I did what experience has taught me to do. I paused, I tried to gather the facts, and then I began asking the questions that every citizen of this country has a right to ask. We were told that hundreds of targets were hit, Revolutionary Guard installations, air defense systems, major naval assets destroyed within minutes. Then came the most dramatic report of all, that Iran's supreme leader had been killed. Let me be very clear about something. That is not a routine development in global affairs. That is the kind of event that shakes the international system. And when the ground shakes like that, the aftershocks tend to follow. But what caught my attention immediately was not just the scale of the operation, it was how it was announced. The president revealed the entire operation in a short video posted on Truth Social, not from the Oval Office, not in a formal national address, not in front of Congress. And the way something like this is communicated often tells you a great deal about how the decision itself was made. Having spent time in that office, I can tell you that when a president commits American forces to combat, the first question is never whether the United States has the strength to win. Our military capability is unmatched. The real question is whether we approach the decision in the right way. But whether the American people were brought into the process, whether Congress was respected, and whether the institutions designed for moments like this were allowed to function. Because the first 48 hours of any military operation shape everything that follows. They influence alliances, credibility, public trust, and the legitimacy of the mission itself. So tonight I want to walk through what we know, what it means, and what may lie ahead. And I want to do that as honestly as possible. During my time in the White House, Iran was never far from the agenda. We dealt constantly with its regional influence, support for groups like Hezbollah, its role in destabilizing parts of the Middle East, and concerns surrounding its nuclear ambitions. I authorized military strikes in the region during my presidency, and I understood the weight those choices carried. One thing you learn very quickly about the Middle East is that actions rarely produce simple reactions. One move can trigger 10 others, many of them impossible to predict. To understand the current moment, we have to go back decades. The modern conflict between the United States and Iran traces back to 1979. The revolution, the hostage crisis, and the long period of hostility that followed. For nearly half a century, relations have been defined largely by mistrust and confrontation. Iran has supported militant organizations such as Hamas and Hezbollah and backed armed groups across Iraq and Syria. That record is not seriously disputed, but there was also a moment when diplomacy opened another path. In 2015, the nuclear agreement negotiated under President Obama POA created a framework designed to limit Iran's nuclear program through inspections and verification. It wasn't flawless. Few international agreements are, but it provided structure and international cooperation from Europe, Russia, and China. When the United States withdrew from that agreement in 2018 without replacing it with a new framework, the diplomatic landscape changed dramatically. Iran accelerated aspects of its nuclear program, tensions increased, and the space for negotiation shrank. So When people ask whether military confrontation with Iran was unavoidable, my answer is no, it was not inevitable. But certain decisions over the years made it increasingly likely. Now let's talk about what we know about the operation itself. On February 28, 2026, U.S. and Israeli forces reportedly carried out coordinated strikes across Iran under the name Operation Epic Fury. According to the administration, hundreds of targets were hit, including facilities connected to the Revolutionary Guard, major air defense systems, and several nuclear sites, Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. Iranian naval assets were destroyed along with shipbuilding infrastructure. Reports also indicate that the country's top military leadership was eliminated during the operation, including the supreme leader, who had ruled for more than 3 decades. But the story does not end there. Iran launched retaliatory strikes against American bases in the region. Missiles were fired toward Israel and explosions were reported across several Gulf countries. Oil markets reacted immediately and concerns grew over potential disruption to the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway through which roughly 1/5 of the world's oil supply travels each day. 3 American service members were killed in the opening phase of the conflict, and in the president's video announcement, another message was delivered, a call for the Iranian military to surrender and for the Iranian people to overthrow their government. That language suggests something more than a military strike. It suggests the possibility of regime change. And that is where the situation becomes especially complicated. Removing a government's ability to threaten you is one thing. Attempting to reshape the political future of an entire nation is another. History has shown repeatedly that the second task is far more difficult than the first. When American troops are placed in danger, there are obligations that come with that decision. Leaders must exhaust diplomatic alternatives, consult Congress, and ensure that the mission has clear objectives and a realistic strategy. Under the Constitution, the power to declare war belongs to Congress. That was intentional. The founders believed decisions of this magnitude should never rest in the hands of a single individual. Yet many lawmakers from both parties say they were not consulted before the strikes occurred. Now Congress is debating war powers resolutions after the fact. From my own experience, even when rapid action was required, there was always an understanding that the president was exercising authority temporarily, with the expectation that Congress would soon be brought fully into the decision. Announcing a war on social media does not fulfill that responsibility. There is also another dimension that deserves attention: what this moment means for American democracy itself. The constitutional system was designed to balance power between branches of government. When those balances weaken, decisions of enormous consequence can be made without the full participation of the institutions meant to guide them. In this case, one of the largest military operations in recent history was initiated without prior authorization from Congress and communicated primarily through a short online video. That raises serious questions about how the process unfolded. Even if the military objectives succeed, and for the sake of every American in uniform, we hope they do, the precedent matters. Launching a large-scale war without debate, without formal consultation, and without a clearly articulated long-term strategy can erode the very democratic principles we claim to defend. Another issue worth discussing is the strategic gamble behind the operation. The administration appears to believe that removing Iran's leadership and destroying major military capabilities could trigger rapid political change inside the country. But history offers cautionary examples. The collapse of a regime is often the beginning of a far more complicated phase, rather than the end of a conflict. After Iraq in 2003 and Libya in 2011, the world saw how difficult it can be to stabilize a nation once its governing structures have been dismantled. Iran is home to nearly 90 million people. Shaping what comes next would require years of diplomatic engagement, economic support, and international cooperation. There are several possible outcomes. In the best-case scenario, Iran's nuclear capabilities are eliminated, the regime collapses and the Iranian people eventually establish a more open and peaceful system of government. But even that outcome would require long-term commitment from the international community. Another possibility is a prolonged conflict, proxy attacks, regional instability, rising oil prices, cyber warfare, and ongoing military confrontation across the Middle East. A third possibility is wider escalation involving additional countries and global powers. And there is always the risk of humanitarian consequences inside Iran itself. Right now, the administration has not fully explained what the end of this conflict is supposed to look like. Winning battles is not the same as winning peace. Before I finish, I want to return to the human cost of all this. Tonight, 3 American families are mourning loved ones who gave their lives in service to this country. They raised their hands, took an oath, and accepted extraordinary risks on behalf of the rest of us. Whatever disagreements people may have about the decisions that led to this moment, those men and women deserve our respect and gratitude. For me, the central question is not whether confronting Iran is justified. Preventing nuclear proliferation and protecting national security are legitimate objectives. The question is how we pursue those goals. America is strongest when it acts through its institutions, when it builds genuine alliances, and when it turns to military force only after exhausting every other option. War should always be the last resort, undertaken with the clear consent of the American people through their elected representatives. Right now, I believe we owe ourselves an honest national conversation about how this decision was made and where it leads next. Congress must assert its constitutional role. The administration must present a clear strategy, including objectives, timeline, and an exit plan. And the American people must remain engaged because our democracy belongs to all of us, not to any single president or political party. Our military strength is extraordinary, but the true strength of the United States has always been our ability to correct our course when necessary. We've done it before in our history. We can do it again, but only if we remember that decisions about war and peace must never belong to one person alone. Let's make sure we get this right for those families, for the service members still in uniform tonight, and for the future of our country. Thank you for listening, and God bless the United States of America.